So peptide hormone. Peptide hormone again binds to the cell surface receptor. And how does peptide hormone how does peptide hormone bring changes to a cell after the peptide hormone binds to the cell surface receptor? It uses something called signal transduction cascade. An example is cyclic AMP signal transduction cascade. The peptide hormone binds to the receptor. So we call the peptide hormone the first messenger. So the peptide hormone itself is called a first messenger. And then activation of the peptide hormone receptor on the cell surface will lead to the activation of the second messenger. And second messenger is the one that trigger a lot of downstream enzymatic cascade. So when enzyme will activate multiple downstream enzyme, and then each multiple downstream enzyme will activate a lot of multiple downstream enzymes as well. So as you can see that it is actually a multiplication process. It is an amplification. So it can amplify a 1,000-fold response. So this is what it happened. So the blood vessels capillary carries the peptide hormone. I told you that an example is epinephrine or norepinephrine. So epinephrine or norepinephrine binds to the receptor on the cell surface because they cannot pass through the phospholipid bilayer. And then here we call this is what we call a G protein. After the hormone binds to the receptor, it will release this G protein. The G protein will go to activate this. We call it a cyclic AMP. We call it adenylate cyclase. This is called adenylate cyclase. Adenylate cyclase, what it does is that it will convert ATP into cyclic AMP. And this cyclic AMP is what we call the second messenger. This cyclic AMP can amplify, will have a lot of downstream reaction to amplify a lot of reaction. What about steroid hormones? Steroid hormones, as we mentioned before, they are hydrophobic, so they can pass through the phospholipid bilayer, cell membrane, and bind to the receptor inside the cell. So the receptor can be in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus, inside the nucleus. After the steroid hormone binds to the receptor, they will form a complex that can bind to DNA. When the hormone binds to DNA, then it can affect the transcription, and also in turn it can affect the translation as well. So the steroid hormone affects the cell function going through the central dogma, transcription and translation. So the steroid hormone can go through the phospholipid bilayer because it is lipid soluble or hydrophobic. And then it can bind to the receptor in the cytoplasm, or in this case, it binds to the receptor inside the nucleus and form a complex. And then they will sit on the DNA. Then it will affect the transcription or the making of messenger RNA, and indirectly affecting the translation, making of the protein. The question to you is that which hormone, steroid hormone or peptide hormone, which hormone will have a faster effect? So the amplification, the second messenger amplification cascade, or this transcription translation? So I'll tell you the answer in the next video. Okay, pheromone. Pheromone is, well, it is very famous due to a lot of commercial exaggeration. So it's a chemical signal between the individual in the same species. It is more well-known and better studied, better understood in animal than human being. The main reason is that we human being do not have the olfactory receptor to let the pheromone to bind to it. So we cannot detect human pheromone. We cannot. It's not like dogs or cats. Their nose, they have the olfactory receptor that they can detect the pheromone. But it doesn't mean that we don't. We actually produce pheromones, and also the pheromone also has an effect to affect us. Here are the example. Possibly because it is not well established about the attraction, but this is something that is well studied, well publicized. Is that if you put several female college students to live in the same dorm room, then eventually their menstrual cycle will be synchronized. This is an example of the pheromone. So let's start talking about the endocrine system. This is officially the starting point. Hypothalamus is part of the brain, but it is the command center of the endocrine system. It can affect our body by autonomic nervous system that we briefly talk about in the nervous system lecture. It can affect heartbeat, blood pressure, appetite, body temperature, and water balance. Okay, it can affect the heartbeat, but it cannot trigger the heartbeat. So the way it affects heartbeat is just to increase or decrease the heartbeat. It cannot trigger the heartbeat because the triggering of the heartbeat, it is in the SA node, sinoatrial node, in the right atrium. And then pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is the second in command in the endocrine system. Pituitary gland has two parts, anterior and posterior. And in here I can say that posterior pituitary gland is actually the extension of hypothalamus. It is basically the same thing. But hypothalamus just extended to posterior pituitary because posterior pituitary has a lot more capillary network to allow the distribution of the hormone to the bloodstream easier.